Hello, and welcome to the ongoing saga of The Thief of Always. But first, what I wanted to do was to switch over and see if my notes look good from the other day, reading chapter 1. And this is what I did while I was reading. Sorry about the handwriting. But I wrote down that it was chapter 1. It was about Harvey Swick. He was bored. I love this idea of the great gray beast. February has eaten Harvey alive. Rictus is magical. I put no questions. He doesn't like questions. And he's promising adventure. And then there's the mom. I just put her in there. She seems like a typical mom, right? Clean your room. And Harvey's house is where it takes place, specifically in his bedroom. And I just wrote gray February just because I like that so much. It's kind of like that gray April now. I was wondering if they're going on an adventure. It seems like it. Rictus is promising. I'm like, is Harvey too smart for this? To me, Rictus feels a little evil. That big smile and the fact that he doesn't like questions. And I'm thinking to myself, what adventure and where are they going? And then I just got ready to write notes for chapters 2 and 3. But I'll show you what I did. I transferred everything over to the sheet where that I gave you on Google Classroom. And I don't know if you can read it all that well because it's not as, shall I say, as wonderful as I thought it was. But I just rewrote it. I added more stuff like Harvey Swick, bored, the great gray beast February had eaten H alive. I try not to write too much. Rictus, and then I put question marks, magical. I'm like, no questions. Promises adventure. And then I wrote that the mother was pretty typical. And then where settings, Harvey's house. And I thought I better get specific because bedroom, something about the bedroom. He can kind of hide it from his family. And then I wrote gray February. And then I thought, okay, what's going on? Are they going on an adventure? I don't know. And then I'm thinking and wondering, Harvey's too smart to fall for this. Come on, he's having doubts himself. And what's up with this Rictus guy? He seems strangely evil. I added strangely. And then, what's the adventure? Where are they going? I don't know. So that was my notes for my first chapter, because the next chapter I'm going to read to you now is called The Thief of Always. And in The Thief of Always, there are chapters 2 and 3 that I'm going to do today. Chapter 2 is The Hidden Way, and chapter 3 is Pleasure and the Worry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over, get my book here, Thief of Always. I think I'm going to bring it up a little bit so you can see everything because the pictures are totally cool. And I got my little bookmark here, and this is the first picture that you see. And it's called The Hidden Way. Harvey said nothing about his peculiar visitor to either his mom or his dad, in case they put locks on the windows to stop Rictus returning to the house. But the trouble with keeping the visit a secret was that after a few days, Harvey began to wonder if he'd imagined the whole thing. Perhaps he'd fallen asleep at the window, he thought, and Rictus had simply been a dream. He kept hoping, nevertheless. Watch for me, Rictus had said. And Harvey did just that. He watched from the window of his room. He watched from his desk at school. He even watched with one eye. He was lying on the pillow at night. But Rictus didn't show. And then, about a week after that first visit, just as Harvey's hope was waning, his watchfulness was rewarded. On his way to school one foggy morning, he heard a voice above his head and looked up to see Rictus floating down from the clouds. His coat swelled up around him so that he looked fatter than a prize pig. "How you doing?" he said as he descended. "Well, I was starting to think I'd invented you," Harvey replied. Like a dream. "I get that a lot," Rictus said, his smile wider than ever. particularly from the ladies. You're a dream come true, they say. He winked. And who am I to argue? You like my shoes? Harvey looked down at Rictus's bright blue shoes. They were quite a sight, and he said so. I got given them by my boss, Rictus said. He's very happy you're coming to visit. So are you ready? Well, it's no use wasting time, Rictus said. There may not be room for you tomorrow. Well, can I just ask one question? I thought we agreed. I know, but just one. All right, one. Is this place far from here? Nah, it's just across town. So I'd only be missing a couple hours of school? That's two questions, Rictus said. Oh, no, I'm just thinking out loud. Rictus grunted. Look, he said, I'm not here to do a great song and dance persuading you. I got a friend called Jive, does that. I'm just a smiler. I smile and I say, come with me to the holiday house. And if folks don't want to come, he shrugged, well, hey, it's their hard luck. With that, he turned his back on Harvey. Wait, Harvey protested. I want to come, but just for a little while. You can stay as long as you like, Richter said, or as little. All I want to do is take that glum expression off your face and put one of these up there. His grin grew even larger. Oh, is there any crime in that? No, said Harvey. There's no crime. I'm glad you found me. I really am. So what if he missed all of the morning at school, he thought? It'd be no great loss. Maybe an hour or two of the afternoon as well, as long as he was back home by 3 or 4, certainly before dark. I'm ready to go, he said to Rictus. Lead the way. Well, Millsap, the town in which Harvey had lived all his life, wasn't very big, and he thought he'd seen just about all of it over the years. But the streets he knew were soon behind them. Rictus was setting a fair speed. Harvey made sure he kept a mental list of landmarks along the way in case he had to find his way home on his own. A butcher's shop with 2 pigs' heads hanging from the hooks, a church with a yard full of old tombs beside it, the statue of some dead general covered from hat to stirrups and pigeon dung. All these sights and more he noted and filed away. And while they talked, Rictus kept up a stream of idle chatter. I hate the fog, just hate it, he said. And there it'll be rain by noon. We'll be out of it, of course. He went on from talk of rain to the state of the streets. Look at this trash all over the sidewalks. That's shameful. And the mud, it's making a fine old mess of my shoes. He had plenty more to say, but none of it was very enlightening. So after a while, Harvey gave up listening. How far was this holiday house, he began to wonder. The fog was chilling him, and his legs were aching. If they didn't get there soon, he was going to turn back. I know what you're thinking, said Rictus. I bet you don't. You're thinking this is all a trick. You're thinking Rictus is leading you on a mystery tour and there's nothing at the end of it. Isn't that true? Maybe a little. Well, my boy, I've got news for you. Look up ahead. He pointed, and not very far from where they stood was a high wall, which was so long that it disappeared into the fog to the right and to the left. What do you see? Rictus asked him. A wall, Harvey replied. The more he stared at it, the less certain of this he was. The stones, which had seemed solid enough at first sight, now looked to be shifting and wavering, as though they'd been chiseled from the fog itself and piled up here to keep out prying eyes. It looks like a wall, Harvey said, but it's not a wall. Oh, you're very observant, Rictus replied admiringly. Most people just see a dead end, so then they turn around and take another street. But not us. No, not us. We're going to keep on walking. You know why? Because the holiday house is on the other side. What a miraculous kid you are, Rictus replied. That's exactly right. Are you hungry, by the way? Starving. Well, there's a woman waiting for you in the house called Mrs. Griffin, and let me tell you, she is the greatest cook in all of America land. I swear on my tailor's grave, anything you can dream of eating, she can cook. All you have to do is ask. Her deviled eggs, smacked his lips. Perfection. I don't see a gate, Harvey said. Well, that's because there isn't one. Well, so how do we get in? Just keep walking. Half out of hunger, half out of curiosity, Harvey did as Rictus had instructed, and he came in within 3 steps of the wall. A gust of balmy, flower-scented wind slipped between the shimmering stones and kissed his cheek. Its warmth was welcome after his long, cold trek, and he picked up his pace, reaching out to touch the wall as he approached it. The misty stones seemed to reach for him in their turn, wrapping their soft gray arms around his shoulders and ushering him through the wall. He looked back, but the streets he'd stepped out of, with its gray sidewalks and gray clouds, had already disappeared. Beneath his feet, the grass was high and full of flowers. Above his head, the sky was midsummer blue. And ahead of him, set at the summit of a great slope, was a house that had surely been first imagined in a dream. He didn't wait to see if Rictus was coming after him, nor to wonder how the gray beast February had been slain and this warm day risen in its place. He simply let out a laugh that Rictus would have been proud of, and hurried up the slope and into the shadow of the dream house. That's chapter 2. Chapter 3, pleasure and the worry. Notice they're using Roman numerals. Chapter 3, pleasure and the worry. What a fine thing it would be, Harvey thought, to build a place like this, to drive its foundations deep into the earth, to lay its floors and hoist its walls, to say, where there was nothing, I raised a house. That would be a very fine thing. It wasn't a puffed up peacock of a place either. There were no marble steps, no fluted columns. It was a proud house, certainly, but there was nothing wrong with that. It had much to be proud of. It stood 4 stories high and boasted more windows than Harvey could readily count. Its porch was wide, as were the steps that led up to its carved front door. Slated roofs were steep and crowned with magnificent chimneys and lightning rods. Its highest point, however, was neither a chimney nor a lightning rod, but a large and elaborately wrought weather vane, which Harvey was peering up at when he heard the front door open and a voice say, Harvey Swick as I live and breathe. He looked down, the weather vane's white silhouette still behind his eyes, and there on the porch stood a woman who made his grandmother, the oldest person he knew, look young. She had a face like a rolled up ball of cobwebs, from which her hair, which could also have been a spider's work, fell in wispy abundance. Her eyes were tiny, her mouth tight, her hands gnarled. Her voice, however, was melodious, and its words welcoming. I thought maybe you decided not to come, she said, picking up a basket of freshly cut flowers she'd left on the step, which would have been a pity. Come on in, there's food on the table. You must be famished. Oh, I can't stay long, Harvey said. Oh, you must do whatever you wish, came the reply. I'm Mrs. Griffin, by the way. Yes, Rictus mentioned you. Well, I hope he didn't bend your ear too much. He loves the sound of his own voice. That and his reflection. Harvey climbed the porch steps by now and stopped in front of the open door. This was a moment of decision, he knew, though he wasn't quite certain why. "Step inside," Mrs. Griffin said, and brushing a spider hair back from her furrowed brow. But Harvey still hesitated, and he might have turned around and never stepped inside the house, except that he heard a boy's voice yelling, "I gotcha! I gotcha!" followed by an uproarious laughter. "Wendell," Mrs. Griffin said, "are you chasing the cats again?" The sound of laughter grew even louder, and it was so full of good humor that Harvey stepped over the threshold and into the house just so that he could see the face of its owner. He only got a brief look. A goofy, bespectacled face appeared for a moment at the other end of the hallway. Then a piebald cat dashed between the boy's legs, and he was off after it, yelling and laughing again. "Oh, he's such a crazy boy," Mrs. Griffin said, "but all the cats love him." The house was more wonderful inside than out. Even on the short journey to the kitchen, Harvey glimpsed enough to know that this was a place built for games, chases, and adventures. It was a maze in which no two doors were alike. It was a treasure house where some notorious pirate had hidden his blood-stained booty. It was a resting place for carpets flown by jinns and boxes sealed before the flood, where the eggs of beasts that the earth had lost were wrapped and waiting for the sun's heat to hatch them. "It's perfect," Harvey muttered to himself. Mrs. Griffin caught his words. "Nothing's perfect," she replied. "Why not?" "Because time passes," she went on, staring down at the flowers she'd cut. "And the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later." Hearing this, Harvey wondered what grief it was Mrs. Griffin had known or seen to make her so mournful. "I'm sorry," she said, covering her melancholy with a tiny smile. "You didn't come here to listen to my dirges. You came to enjoy yourself, didn't you?" "I guess I did," Harvey said. "Well, so let me tempt you with some treats." Harvey sat himself down at the kitchen table, and within 60 seconds, Mrs. Griffin had set a dozen plates of food in front of him: hamburgers, hot dogs, and fried chicken, mounds of buttered potatoes, apple, cherry, and mud pies, ice cream and whipped cream, grapes, tangerines, and a plate of fruits he couldn't even name. He set to eating with gusto, and he was devouring his second slice of pie when a freckled girl with long, frizzy blonde hair and huge blue-green eyes ambled in. "You must be Harvey," she said. "Well, how did you know?" "Wendell told me." "How did he know?" She shrugged. "He just heard. I'm Lulu, by the way." "Did you just arrive?" "No, I've been here for ages. Longer than Wendell, but not as long as Mrs. Griffin. Nobody's been here as long as she has. Isn't that right?" "Almost," said Mrs. Griffin a little mysteriously. "Do you want something to eat, sweetie?" Lulu shook her head. "No, thanks. I haven't got much of an appetite at the moment." She nevertheless sat down opposite Harvey, stuck her thumb in the mud pie, and licked it clean. "Who invited you here?" she asked. A guy called Rictus." "Oh, yeah, the one with the grin." "That's him. Oh, he's got a sister and two brothers," she went on. "You've met them then?" Not all of them," Lulu admitted. "They keep themselves to themselves. But you'll meet one or two of them sooner or later." I don't think I'll be staying," Harvey said. "I mean, my mom and dad don't even know I'm here." "Sure they do," Lulu replied. "They just didn't tell you about it." This confused Harvey, and he said, Well, call your mom and dad," Lulu suggested. "Ask them." "Can I do that?" he wondered. "Of course you can," Mrs. Griffin replied. The phone's in the hallway. Carrying a spoonful of ice cream with him, Harvey went to the phone and dialed. At first, there was a whining sound on the line as though a wind were in the wires. Then, as it cleared, he heard his mom say, "Who is this?" "Before you start yelling," he began. "Oh, honey," his mom cooed. "Did you arrive?" "Arrive? You are at the holiday house, I hope." "Oh, yes, I am, but—" "Oh, good. I was worried maybe you'd lost your way. Do you like it there?" "You knew I was coming," Harvey said, catching Lulu's eye. "I told you," she mouthed. "Of course we knew," his mom went on. "We invited Mr. Richtus to show you the place. You look so sad, you poor lamb. We thought you needed a little fun." "Really?" said Harvey, astonished by this turn of events. "Well, we just want you to enjoy yourself," his mom went on. "So you stay just as long as you want." "Well, what about school?" he said. "You deserve a little time off," came the reply. "Don't you worry about anything. Just have a good time." "I will, Mom." "Bye, honey." "Bye." Harvey came away from the conversation shaking his head in amazement. "You were right," he said to Lulu. "They arranged everything." "So now you don't have to feel guilty," said Lulu. "Well, I guess I'll see you around later." And with that, she ambled away. "Ah, if you're finished eating," Mrs. Griffin said, "I'll show you to your room." "Oh, I'd like that." She duly led Harvey up the stairs. At the landing, basking on the sun-drenched windowsill, was a cat with fur the color of the cloudless sky. "That's Blue Cat," Mrs. Griffin said. "You saw Stu Cat playing with Wendell. I don't know where Clue Cat is, but he'll find you. He likes new guests." "Well, do you have a lot of people coming here?" "Only children, very special children like you and Lulu and Wendell. Mr. Hood won't have just anybody." "Well, who's Mr. Hood?" "The man who built the holiday house," Mrs. Griffin replied. "Will I meet him too?" Mrs. Griffin looked discomforted by the question. "Maybe," she said, her gaze averted, "but he's a very private man." They were up on the landing by now, and Mrs. Griffin led Harvey past a row of painted portraits to a room at the back of the house. It overlooked an orchard, and the warm air carried up the smell of ripe apples into the room. "You look tired, my sweet," Mrs. Griffin said. "Maybe you should lie down for a little while." Harvey usually hated to sleep in the afternoon. It reminded him too much of having the flu or the measles. But the pillow looked very cool and comfortable. And when Mrs. Griffin had taken her leave and decided to lie down, just for a few minutes, either he was more tired than he thought, or the calm and the comfort of the house rocked him into a slumber. Whichever, his eyes closed almost as soon as he put his head on the pillow, and they did not open again until morning. A Death Between Seasons comes next. So I hope you like this installment of chapters 2 and 3. And now it'll be a good time before you forget. Well, you can always go back and listen and jot a few notes on your new sheet for chapters 2 and 3. Have a good day. Sweet dreams. Bye-bye.